Great, so we can call this meeting of the Curriculum Instruction Subcommittee to order. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Chairperson Martin,
Here.
Mr. Bahu,
Here.
Ms. Doherty.
Here.
Three present.
I have to say I did not bring my packet. Is there an
Would you
extra?
like?
If you would mind, if there's something I could follow along on, okay, do I apologize?
No.
I do. Bring that.
Maybe get
Subcommittees.
A pen? Yeah.
Oh, pen. Oh,
Great, all
man.
set.
Thanks. Do you mind a pencil?
I don't mind.
So we're here this evening to discuss the curriculum audit, which had taken place in August. It's from August of 24 to January of 25. We have the attached executive summary. Can you maybe walk us through the findings?
So did you want me to give an overview of?
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think for the audience,
Right.
the 1,000,001 people out there on the edge of their seat.
So if we go to the executive summary, what you're looking at are, so the audit actually started in August, as you mentioned, and then it continued until the 17th of January were concluded. And it was a curriculum audit, specifically focused on the instructional routines and literacy and the curriculum for ELA and literacy in the district across grades K through 8. We partnered with an organization called the Tune, and they used, I'd say about 4 or 5 different aspects of methodology to look at different pieces in the curriculum. So one of the, if you look at the report, you'll see a methodology, you'll see some key findings that are considered strengths, and then some key findings that are gaps, then some specific concerns about the current core curriculum that's in the Lowell public schools, which is the units of study. And then you'll see some data by grade there, as well as some artifacts, and then some recommendations about the document. So the key points, the partner who has been in Lowell for probably 2 years, or 2 or 3 years, they wanted to spend time assessing the effectiveness and coherence of the district's literacy curriculum. They use a multifaceted approach, so they looked at classrooms. They reviewed seminal artifacts from the district, so scope and sequences, curriculum guides, and planning tools that were used. They also did some stakeholder input sessions. So that those were opportunities primarily for our teachers to give input. And then they made a recommendation. And the recommendation that they made is that we really should be shifting the curriculum that we are using to something that is more high quality and higher standard. So the first part of the audit was focused on, a piece of it was focused on classroom observations. And so in the first part of the report, you'll notice the schools that are listed. There were 10 of our schools that were observed. 10 schools, and then they went through 55 different classrooms and came up with a rubric that they used for some indicators for what they actually observed and saw in classrooms. They also analyzed the artifacts that I mentioned, so they reviewed all of the curriculum guides, all of the tools that were presented to them, and then they also held focus groups. There were 6 focus groups and a total of about 44 of our Lowell educators participated. The bulk of the 44 were our teachers. There were, I think, maybe a handful of principals and some coaches, but the bulk of the focus group input was teachers. And so in terms of, if you go to like your page 3, you'll get a sense of what the key findings were in terms of strengths. So some of the strengths that were identified is that the district has school-based support. So we have coaches. We have coordinators at the central office. We have a number of people who support instruction. We have a collaborative planning process. Not a consistent one, but a process. We also, they observed evidence of for the most part, high expectations in our classrooms by our teachers and engagement by all educators. And then they also highlighted foundational skills instruction as a strength. So there is evidence in many of our schools of Haggerty foundations as well as Letterland, which has proven to have some evidence for being systematic and a support for our students. Then in terms of the areas of improvement, they identify that curriculum materials, specifically the units of study, are not aligned to grade level standards. They also identified inconsistent use of the materials. So this idea that while we have Haggerty, we have Letterland, while we may have foundations, we also have units of study, and they found a varied across the district of the implementation of each of these. And so a lack of coherence was clearly identified by them. And they feel like that's because our teachers have to plan across multiple curriculum versus having only one curriculum that they align and plan with. They also identified as an area of improvement, engagement and rigor. That while our students, and I think we've seen lots of evidence of this, at least I have, of our students doing what we are asking them to do, that some of the instruction is over scaffolded. So they're receiving support that lowers the rigor of the instruction. And then the other piece that they shared quite a bit of information on, and that's around pages 3 and 4. You'll see some examples that our students, the text that they're using for at the complexity level that or grade level that they should be, and that while they observed our classroom instruction, they felt that not a lot of knowledge building was happening in those classrooms.
As you're looking at these different products that we're using, the Haggerty and then Letterland, units of study, what was the other one? Their full
Foundations.
Foundations. Okay. These names
I know.
my own editorial comment there. So and you may be leading into this already. Are we looking at investigating anew, or are we looking at simply focusing on within this grouping?
So while the audit highlights Haggerty Foundation, which are more of the foundational
Okay.
tools,
And are they all K-8 products?
they're not all K-8 products, so they would be more K-3 products. While the audit looked at Haggerty Foundations and Meadowland, we are not at present thinking of removing those.
Okay.
We don't consider those, even though they are used as core, we don't consider them part of what we are really thinking of replacing. What we are thinking of replacing is
Units of study.
units of study, and for all the reasons that I'm sure the research from 2020 and comparing it to other curricula, as well as its misalignment, the standard, a lot of the information that they highlighted about units of study has to do with, it may meet the needs of certain students, but not the students that we serve. So we have a large ML population, and that curriculum is not aligned to support them. And so that's the focus primarily of their recommendations, that we should be really thinking about a comprehensive core curriculum to replace units of study.
And then, so is it Haggerty and Letterland are the K-3 and Foundations is?
Their foundational skills programs that we are using in the earlier grades.
Okay. And does Foundations then be the one that goes up to 8th grade?
No, they're all.
All 3 of them are? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And so what was it did they audit any of the middle school?
They did, we looked at, they went through K-8. So we did
Yeah.
so the schools that they observed were included K-5s, some pre-K to, K-4, some pre-K, pre-K to 4, some K-8, a couple of K-8. And then middle schools, standalone middle schools
Yeah.
were part of the process as well. So yes, it would be looking at changing curriculum across K through 8.
Yeah, I think I'm jumping in the play. If you want to.
No, that was perfect. So you're moving into the key finding.
Yeah.
So basically, they would like us to consider abandoning the current literacy approach, in specifically the units of study. And that was the recommendation from the complete audit, but also with the working group and the team of district staff and school-based coaches as well as principals also concluded the same. They are requesting that we, in terms of recommendations, adopt a cohesive and comprehensive curriculum. They are also making some recommendations of something that we're not addressing necessarily here, but this idea that we need to systematize the coaching work in our district. And so we have coaches across all of our schools, and they encountered incoherence in as how they work. They saw them working, but not a consistent plan or model for how our coaches operate across schools.
Who supervises the coaches?
Collectively, principal supervise.
Okay, so
And they receive professional support from the curriculum office once a month.
But with is there a thought about changing that structure or?
The recommendation, was that smile too?
Yeah, I know, I did.
The recommendation would be that we consider, not necessarily who they report to, but how they stratifying and figuring out a
Pulling this
cohesive
together
way,
more of a.
cohesive way for them to operate. So more of how they will operate, less a focus on who they report to, but more about the consistency and alignment about the work that they're doing in schools. And in support of our teachers. And this was in connection to the audit in relation to professional learning and planning and supports for teachers.
Can I ask, are these coaches, like, are they involved in the, like, professional learning communities at their school sites? Are they doing common planning
Yes.
time? Are they involved in it?
Yes, but to varying degrees.
Okay.
Which is why a recommendation for more clarity around and alignment.
Recommendation.
Yeah.
Any other kind of key recommendations from this group?
That was a big one. Let me think. Mostly alignment and curriculum for units of study. The idea that we want whatever what they are recommending that we take a look at. Maybe if we really want to be successful as a district, that we think of some sort of coherence across K through 8. So rather than multiple tools and resources, 81, which means that at some point we might have to have a conversation about foundations, let it land and head. Because typical comprehensive curriculum would include all of the foundation skills within. But at this time, that is not what we are proposing or recommending.
So for the, like, and I'm looking forward, like, to the next budget season. There wouldn't be any recommendations for a replacement for units of study. Instead, we just keep the 3 we have, and then you're anticipating maybe in a year, we go to a more comprehensive.
No, the recommendation would be that we adopt this year a new core curriculum,
Oh, okay.
which would replace units of study.
Oh, okay.
Fiscally, we don't know whether we can, at this point, do all K through 8, but the recommendation is K through 8.
So what's the process for finding something to replace units of study?
So we, the curriculum office and the team, we have a core working group, which is the group that I mentioned that started with a tune in August. We're probably reconvening that group that was part of this audit. And we will more than likely have a timeline of between maybe now and say somewhere in March. We would identify 3 or 4 curricula that live in the all green for education, ed reports.
Mhm.
And we would have those vendors come to a central location in Lowell, present, have our teachers attend, have our coaches attend, have our principals attend, have educators come through using a rubric, analyze, make recommendations about what they think, and how, whether or not they think that the curriculum is appropriate. And then we would probably have the tools remain, and when it's the curriculum remain in the district for about a week or so that anyone in the community could come through, take a look at it, score it, and then we would tally up the results of these three and come up with a hopeful recommendation of one that we would be considering to adopt. And then the hope would be that this year we would purchase with a plan for professional development in June as well as in the summer, and then a full plan the following year to support the implementation of whichever, if all grades, we would be putting in place. The hope would be that the pilot would be us trying it out starting next year.
That's good. I get one out with it. Any questions?
Yes.
Sorry,
No, if I could. So I guess part of my concern has been that stakeholder piece that I mean, at least me, and I know in past subcommittee meetings, when we had them in curriculum a while ago, but we had been hearing from our teachers that they had concerns about the curriculum we were using. So I want to be very cognizant of their input in this process. And I know you mentioned the focus groups. Was that meetings that were held right before the holidays and Christmas?
So there were 4 before that were held around the holiday, and then 2 after the holiday. And then it's interesting, the 2 after the holiday were probably the larger attended.
Yeah, I know, because I've got a lot of people reaching out to me like, we got a week's notice and it's the last week of school before Christmas, you know, it was just not great timing. So I'm glad you did a follow-up. When you talk about your core working group,
Yes.
how many teachers are on that
So
group?
at present, there are no teachers in that core working group, but there will be teachers.
It's
And I
very,
heard you at school committee.
yeah,
And I've met with Pina a number of times to talk about wanting to increase our teacher participation. You know, of course, you know, and we want voice. We want as much teacher voice as possible. So definitely for the review, there will absolutely be, but you're asking for that representation of teachers in the core working group.
right. I mean, that's a lost opportunity because you started in August. So we basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, we had stakeholder input for the last week in December and the week people came back in January. The final part of this I mean, you had people out in the classroom and in the methodology and all the things they looked at was very good. It seems, but in terms of actual, like, let us hear from the teachers, that happened in December and January.
Yes.
In a very concerted, formal way. So going forward, I would love to have plenty of time for teachers to weigh in on, especially coming up with what are the top 3 that we're going to look at closely. I think that, I mean, it's benefits on so many levels. It's, you know,
No, absolutely.
because they are the ones day in, day out. And I think some of the other things were not surprising to hear, like, and I tried to find it because I circled it, but I don't know where it was, that when Attuned looked at how teachers were using the curriculum, there wasn't consistent use because they were constantly going outside the curriculum to find what they needed. So that's not surprising to me because we had been hearing that, not from the administration, but from teachers for a while. And this was before your time. So I'm not pointing fingers at you, but I want to do it better this time. And then my other concern, and I think you've got a very tight timeline here. The sooner we can make a decision and get these materials, I mean, you talk about June, if we could, like, have some professional development before people leave for the summer, because you're then gonna, and we do this a lot. I mean, at least I've seen it in my time. We introduce something new, here you go, and nobody has a chance, you know, you're always like shooting from the hip on it. So that is also an important factor to keep in mind, the timeline and where we take this information in the next step. But I think it's a good step forward, and I appreciate the work. That's my 2 cents. Not too long. It's pretty good.
Yeah, good.
So, I mean, some of these comments the teachers made
Yeah.
were pretty, strong.
Right.
The school is doing their own thing. So they were mentioning if they go from one school to another, they don't really know what the student knows because they're not teaching in that curriculum. How are we sort of going to align it? And I know professional development is definitely the answer, but realistically, professional development truthfully needs to be like 20 hours per teacher. I don't think it could be 2. I don't think it could be 4. It seems like it has to be more advanced so that everybody from those 10 schools that you're mentioning, K through 8, is on the same page. So how does that happen?
So one of the things that they highlighted in that report is that we do have coaching, that's job embedded, which means that they would receive, provided that we have a consistent system.
Right,
That they would receive more than 2 or 3 hours. It would be.
because they have an on-site coach.
They have an on-site.
And those coaches are gonna get more
More
support.
supported. So this idea that a strength of the district is that we have coaches. What the gap is, the consistent use and structure that the coaches operate in. And so that's something that we are also looking at and working on to fix.
And the coaches go from school to school?
No,
They run right there through the principal's office. And that's where they get their
Yes.
support.
yes,
Because, you had a grid here on page 8. Then, it seems like K through 2, we have students sort of being involved and they're sort of progressing and things are happening. But by the time you get through 3 through 5, that seems like we're losing all the students. And I think we're losing a lot of students statewide, nationwide,
absolutely.
on 3 through 5.
Right.
So how is it that, these numbers soften up so quickly? And it's really funny because when you get the 6 through 8, they begin to sort of get strong again. That to me doesn't make any sense because if you're falling behind on 3 through 5,
Right.
how are you picking it back up on grade 6 through 8? But that's something for another day. So how do we control the 3 through 5 reduction in learning or kids not being able to learn?
So I think the report is highlighting that we need standards aligned instruction. So not just curriculum, but also the instruction. So this idea in some of the models there, I think right after that page 4 and 5, you'll see some examples of what instruction looks like. So like the focus in one of those is an example of a read aloud where they're being directed to look at pictures as opposed to text. That lowers rigor. There's an example of a 4th grade classroom, similarly not knowledge being built in that classroom. So while students might be reading, they're reading a fiction text as opposed to a nonfiction text. So those are what we hope to fix, we hope to move forward on is an alignment to standards, but also an alignment to curriculum that's more balanced, where you're building knowledge as well as.
Sure. They did mention that, students might be interested. If they're interested in something, then they're more understanding of it and they sort of get involved. And they
They also, yeah, they did.
and we can't, give them something that they're interested in all the time. But how do we sort of get them into that?
Well, the report is calling that a shift in the curriculum will make a difference. The fact that they will be using a standards aligned curriculum, that it is considered high quality, that has a balance of fiction and nonfiction, that has some instructional routines that are embedded in, that will allow for students to be engaged. And the report is telling us that if we move in this direction with a new curriculum, that we will make some shifts. We did it in math, and we have seen some small gains, and we're doing it with science. So we're also seeing and hoping to see change and shifts in that as well. But the curriculum matters, but so does instruction. So there will be more of an alignment if we're able to do a K to 8 quality instruction. 3 or 4 different ones, which means that a teacher has to spend 3 or 4 times the amount kind of makes sense, so.
Sure, it's all about the high quality, right? It's all about the high quality. This whole report keeps touching on the high quality source.
Say to, for just before you go, so we're looking at this, the one on page 8, right? That was the one you were referencing. Was, I just want to make sure I'm reading that right, because it's not basically, this isn't tracking performance.
Right.
So it's not that the kids
Exactly.
aren't performing in 3 to 5.
Absolutely.
It's that what we're presenting these kids with isn't of high
High.
enough quality. right?
Exactly.
That's cool.
So I mean, just, you know, it's like, I mean, this is our failing, not students failing.
Right, the intellectual preparation, 26%, right, the grade level,
Yeah.
38%, the cognitive engagement at 36%.
Right.
But, you know, sure, we are failing, no doubt. Doesn't mean that the kids are failing, but ultimately it turns into, you know,
I mean, there are.
Yeah.
the inability to sort of read and grow.
Oh, sure, exactly. They
So-
pay the price for it.
I mean, there are a bunch of sections we read throughout that highlight that our kids are doing exactly what we're asking them to do in many cases.
Yes,
It's
yes.
what we're asking them to do that we need to be really examined.
Sure, that was great information. The cheer, you know, we do have a lot of kids that are engaged, you know,
Yeah.
but what they're engaged in, and the teacher are sort of confused as well when they're coming up with their own
And I think
curriculum.
similarly, they highlight the same thing about our teachers, that they are doing what we are asking them to do. So we need to maybe revisit what we have asked.
Right. Now, last year, this subcommittee had a conversation about the science of reading. Now, is that something that you people are considering, or is
So
that,
it-
you know, I know some people say, hey, listen, that works in some places, but it doesn't work all the places, and, you know, I don't know if that's the exact, it's not proven, and so on and so forth. So what's your general thought?
My general thought is that the National Reading Panel identified elements that are key to teaching students how to read. And those elements don't currently live in units of study, but they should. And I think that whatever HQIM we purchase will have the National Reading Panel endorsement behind it. So
Right.
that the elements will be there. I think that the issue with the science of reading is a little more political side of the spectrum, because before the science of reading, there was the National Reading Panel. Similar to that, there's alignment between the National Reading Panel and the science of reading. So we are looking for evidence, research and evidence-based instructional routines as well as curriculum, and it will come with an HQIM. All of the curriculum that gets green on ed reports have gone through the process where there's alignment for the teaching of reading.
Sure. And it seems like the HQIM is the direction to go.
Yes.
But I do know that a lot of stuff that I read, that they do mention the science of reading, which
They
is,
do.
you know, a buzzword, let's be real, and I understand that, but I think it warrants
Yeah.
conversation and nothing.
Oh, absolutely.
Do we have any ability to, and I mean, just based on kind of within performance levels in Massachusetts, are there any kind of packages or programs that are performing really well in like districts? I mean, like a Brockton or a Lawrence or a, you know. You got me. Gateway cities.
Gateway cities.
I believe, so yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
I would say they're not performing, where we would like them to be performing because it's not just the curriculum.
Of course.
And so,
Yeah.
so yes, so we would also be looking at curriculum that DESE has put through Curate, which allows for the state to take a look at curriculum as it tries to implement and then make decisions about whether or not it's meeting the needs of the kids that Massachusetts serves. So we are going to make sure that we connect with other communities that are like ours, whether they're on the portal or not. So a district that may not be considered like ours, we would also be reaching out to see whether or not what we are choosing also has had stronger implementation benefits in like in Lawrence or in Lowell, or, or Boston, or,
Yeah.
you know, so other districts, we are absolutely planning on doing other districts.
Perfect. Just because for, you know, people who've actually lived with it,
Yeah.
Right.
can give you a,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure, real world kind of review.
And we're hoping to take some of our teachers.
Thank you.
Maybe not a lot. Well, you know, that there's like, we want teacher voice for sure. Like, I absolutely want teacher voice, but I also want our teachers with our kids. And then, so there's a balance of not taking them away from students so much. So that's the biggest issue. But we are thinking, one of the stages in this process is once we make a decision to go with some teachers and maybe some of the coaches to see the implementation of whichever curriculum we pick in a district that would be like ours. So,
If I could too, I'd love to ask when, as you're going through this process and when we're getting to the point where it's going to be presented to us, you know, and again, I'm thinking kind of budget time. If it could be presented with that fully fleshed out professional development plan and what the expenses would be for that. Because I do think, I mean, to Ms. Doherty's point, if we make a choice in May and we can get this into teachers' hands in June, and specifically into the coaches' hands in June, you do have some capacity to do some training over the summer.
Right.
We'd be able to pay people to do it. So I mean, we could take advantage of that. And I just think that if we're implementing, and I mean, I would defer, you know, to you and the administration kind of making this choice, but if we're implementing something as far reaching as a new curriculum framework for our K through 8, I mean, that's a significant portion of our district, obviously. I mean, I for one would be comfortable spending some money on a professional development plan that allowed us to really implement it. Because again, as I think both Fred and Jackie had seen this before, when we just throw people in the deep water, I mean, it's unrealistic to expect them to be able to kind of be successful.
we absolutely plan on a comprehensive plan and appreciate that you are willing to support us financially.
I say that, there may be others who may not be, but, you know, but I mean, and I think you should be using, I mean, especially if you have teachers involved in this right at the beginning, they can help craft that.
Right.
And, you know, ensure that we're providing something that's actually helpful for frontline staff. Which I think would be great.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Fred, you better come to my meeting.
Because, you know, because you'll see the growth, right? You'll see the growth not only with the teaching staff, but you'll see the growth within the students themselves. It just, the two-pronged.
We'll create a movement.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. Because
That's what we want.
there's lots of room to, you know, extend.
Yeah.
What we're planning.
You're absolutely right, I agree. Okay, are there any other questions, concerns, committee?
Nope.
Anything else we should know about before we come back to our colleagues that are meeting tomorrow night? I don't know, is this on there tomorrow night? No. Okay. Should we sort down? We
We're
can,
not meeting on the 19th.
Yeah, you'll be reporting at the March 5th meeting.
I mean, it's fine with me, it doesn't change anything if we do it on March.
Or whatever it is.
Is it vacation? Is that why the 19th?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
I
voted
don't
it.
remember if we had
At
voted.
the last meeting, we
The
said
meeting
that.
might be March 6th.
I'm sorry, Pina, yes, go right ahead.
I'm sorry,
Oh, don't be silly, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
I thank you for allowing us to be here. I just couldn't help but think that, the key here, we're talking about reading. I started in, here in Lowell in 1996. And I think it was close to 60 or 70% of our students at the Robinson were reading at least 2 years below grade level. And from some of the information that we're getting, not much has changed, and that's very alarming. But I think it's important. This is wonderful, and I'm happy to hear about the teacher voice, happy to hear about the program moving forward. But I think we really have to consider, as part of the equation, that all teachers are teachers of reading, right? And I just have to very quickly tell you a story. My daughter Jennifer works at the Wang. She was an instructional specialist. And we were having a conversation, and she was a second grade teacher. She's been teaching about 20 years. And at one point, they commended her for her students doing well in the reading. And she said to me, "Ma, I have no idea what I did. I'm happy that they progressed." And we're having this conversation now. And she said to me, "I really had no idea how to teach children how to read." Yeah, and that was quite insightful for someone who's been teaching all this time, but 2 points. One is that it's not just our ELA teachers, it's all our teachers, our gym teacher, your math teacher, they all need to be part of this program. And they all really need to have some basis for how do you teach reading. I know over the years, I've done the Wilson, there are so many programs that have come, and it's not a one size fits all, there's no silver bullet, all those cliches, but I would venture to guess, and I know I started as a sped teacher, some sped teachers will say to me, I know I'm supposed to teach reading, but I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing, let alone how. So we have to get down to, I think, the elements, you explained that there are certain elements broken down in terms of, teaching reading, but that professional development really is I would suggest and recommend it's across the board, not just our ELA teachers or our SPED teachers. I thank you for the, Mickey, did you want to say anything?
We allowed to say we agree with it?
Yes, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
We agree.
Anytime Tina walks in the room, you're allowed to say you agree with it.
All right.
Okay, perfect. If nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Bahu, seconded by Ms. Doherty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.